Are you optimistic about the future of humanity? Do you see any way that technology can close the gap between ever-increasing human consumption on a finite planet?
I don't think more of the same approach to technology can do it, because our approach to technology, the more we intensify the use of the kind of technology we know how to deal with now, the more we impose on the biosphere, the more damage and degradation we cause to the biosphere. So I think the only way out is not just like more technology of the kind that we're used to making, but basically new social systems and a new attitude towards what technology is supposed to be doing. And so I don't really want to say if I'm optimistic about it or not, but I think it will require some kind of crisis to get us out of our business as usual mentality. I mean, you know, the United Nations is putting out alerts saying like, look, you know, we're in serious trouble here with global warming. We've got like 10 years to stop carbon emissions if you want to stay below 1.5 degrees warming, and we don't think we're going to do that. And so basically we're just going to get into more and more trouble until we shape up. And so I don't know if that counts as optimistic or not, right? But it's like nature is giving us stronger and stronger nudges to like get our act together.
I have a question for you. As far as I know, most fundamental physicists are not interested in condensed matter physics or fluid dynamics. How would you usher any of that energy, the intelligence and the intellect, into actual, this is more applied, right?
Sorry, how would I get like fundamental physicists interested in
to think about these questions of not creating waste, because they're definitely not driven by the questions of are we creating waste or are we not creating waste? They're driven by a whole different set of questions. How would you even, because colliders, yes, they create a lot of waste and they're building a giant one, you know?
Yeah, well,
How would you even bring this question up or ask?
Well, one way I do it is I give a talk that's sort of like this, but sort of more hard-edged to actual physicists, audiences of physicists, where I try to tell them, like, fundamental physics is just not going anywhere. It hasn't gone anywhere since 1980. You should get out. And mainly I aim that not at like people who are already doing it, but the more impressionable grad students. I could say, like, look, do you want to do something really cool that's like going to have a big effect, or do you just want to keep on trying to do what we've been trying to do since 1980 and not succeeding? So I think, so basically, well, you know, Max Planck said, science advances one funeral at a time, right? A very snide but true remark. So that instead of like trying to persuade oldsters to change their ways, it's probably more productive to try to get youngsters to see what's exciting. And so I also like try to convince science magazines and so on that they should start having more articles about condensed matter physics and try to make that seem cool instead of things like black holes and string theory and so on, which are really not going to impact us that much. And I think it's not just due to me, but I think that's starting to happen. Yeah, I mean, a whole bunch of people went into physics in my generation because they saw Einstein as this amazing figure, and they said, "Hey, that looks like a great thing to do. I'll do that." Yeah, right. Yeah, but what's really getting somewhere now, what's really making progress, is other branches of physics than the idea of like, oh, I'll be the next Einstein. I'll unify the standard model in quantum mechanics. So I think eventually it's bound to catch on. I'm just trying to speed it up a little.
Given the state we're in now, Homo sapiens, it's hard for me to imagine that some of these problems we think about, concepts, is within our capability. That the ultimate answers are going to come from AGI, artificial general intelligence. How close are we to assigning these problems and these solutions to machines rather than ourselves?
Things are changing very rapidly with AI, so that's a great area for me to not make any predictions in. I will say that, like, right now, AI is really crappy at doing physics, but, you know, that could be quite different 10 years from now. I don't think just like, I don't know. I don't personally think that just large language models will be the be-all and end-all of AI, because I don't know if any amount of scraping the internet will let you make a revolutionary discovery in physics. I mean, there are a lot of crackpots out there, and you can unify all their theories and come up with a better one. But no, that's not how to do it. But advances in AI are happening so fast that, yeah, that could render a whole bunch of our current expectations of the future way outdated in 10 or 20 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So there, you know, humans may not be the big thing anymore.
What you're saying is making me think about AI as one direction to go in, but how actively do physicists seek out collaboration with metaphysicists and visionaries? And do you think that has the translation of some of their thinking would have an impact on your thinking?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think when you start trying to combine sort of mystical or visionary thinking with science, it's very easy to screw up. It's so easy to blunder in different ways that most physicists sort of just would rather you not try to do that. But it is also true that a lot of the best physicists in the 20th century did have a strong mystical or visionary streak to them, like Einstein and Pauli and so on. And so, yeah, I don't know. The mystical side of things is something that doesn't seem to get conveyed very well through speech or conversation. So, you know, as soon as you start talking about that stuff, you start to sort of contaminate it and mess it up. So, unless you're like really careful at writing, which some poets are able to do. So I'm certainly not really able to say much about that. But so I think there's a realm out there that's interesting, but 99% of what's said about it is just complete baloney. So I'm not going to try to add to that.
Hello, thank you for the great talk over here.
Okay.
I just really latched on to what you said about moving towards an economy of meaning. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that, because I think that might also be something that bridges that other world of metaphysics where people are trying to find that meaning. And you seem to think that it is meaningful to find that meaning, but what do you mean by that?
That's quite a question you planned out there. Yeah. Okay, it just came right out. That's nice. That's great. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is that we have these economic indicators of economic growth like GDP, and we sort of seem to have all, to some extent, fooled ourselves into thinking that like increasing those indicators are the ways to become happier. But we know that that's not really true, and now luckily there are economists thinking about happiness to realize that it's not, getting happier is not the same thing as like economic growth or more use of resources. Of course, if you're starving, there's certain things you need to be happy, but if you're past a certain point, the increase in happiness, and especially the increase of what I'd call meaningful happiness, comes through very different things that could be extremely cheap in terms of like the normal economy of dollars, right? I mean, like the right sort of book could you know, cost a few bucks and provide a lot more deep, meaningful happiness than any number of plane trips around the world to seeing all sorts of cool sights. And so I think we're going to be pressured by nature into realizing that. I mean, everyone sort of realizes it, but somehow we forget it, right? And so we say, I don't want to read a book. I'd rather go on a flight, you know. So, but when it starts becoming like illegal to emit more than a certain amount of carbon because, you know, the governments have cracked down on it because they realize that it's a problem, or whatever, when we all realize that it's just too deleterious to the environment, then maybe that book will start looking better. And so basically, the sooner we start realizing that, the better it's all going to be for everybody.
Thank you all for coming. If we could have one last round of applause for John Baez.
Thanks. Thanks.